When my son told me to find somewhere else to die, that I was now just a useless old man, I quietly left the house I had built with my own hands, penny by penny. 3 days later, I sat in a lawyer's office discovering that my late wife, Marilyn, had left me more than just a will. Michael was about to learn that there were clauses written to punish his very betrayal. If you're watching, subscribe and let me know what state you're following from. Let me tell you about my journey from a retired engineer kicked out of his home to the father who brought his son and daughter-in-law to their knees before the FBI. Because this story, my friend, has more twists than a chess match between two people who think they're clever. 2 months ago, I was Arthur Brennan, a retired civil engineer, a devoted husband of 46 years, and the father of a son I now have to admit is despicably ungrateful. When Marilyn passed away from pancreatic cancer at 69, I thought my world had ended with her. Michael, our only son, and his wife Tessa came to Springfield to help me after the funeral. Michael said things like, "Dad, I just want to make sure you're okay. This house is too big for you to manage alone." It sounded caring, but there was something in his eyes that chilled me, a calculating look like he was appraising everything around me. Tessa always smiled, a polite, professional, emotionless smile, like a nurse too accustomed to ushering patients into hospice. "Dad needs to rest," she said. "You shouldn't be fussing with a leaky roof or dripping pipes anymore." Willow Ridge Nursing Home is nearby, with peppermint yoga classes for seniors. She emphasized seniors as if I were so senile I couldn't tell day from night. When I mentioned I still went grocery shopping, fixed the washing machine, and remembered the Wi-Fi password, Michael gave a faint smile, patted my shoulder like I'd just pulled off a miracle post-stroke. Then they started printing brochures looking for suitable places, calling nursing homes without even asking me. The house I had tiled brick by brick suddenly became a burden in my son's eyes. But I still thought maybe they were genuinely worried. Until one afternoon, just 3 days after burying my wife, Michael walked into the living room, placed a stack of papers on the coffee table, and said in a tone mixed with pity and finality, "Dad, it's time to hand things over. Everything belongs to me and Tessa now." I looked at him confused. "Hand over what? The house? Don't you remember?" Tessa chimed in, handing me a copy. "The power of attorney. You signed it last month." Something cold slithered down my spine. I hadn't signed anything, but before I could react, Michael continued, "You can't stay here anymore. I've booked a place for you at Maplewood Haven. I'll drive you there on Monday." My entire life was summed up in one sentence: "You can't stay here anymore." That was how Michael ended every argument, every fragile hope I still clung to. He didn't yell, didn't get angry, just a statement, delivered with the tone of someone who had planned meticulously and was ready to pull the trigger. Before I could even process it, Tessa came in with an envelope and 2 small suitcases, my luggage already helpfully packed. "You just need to rest," she said, handing me 2 $100 bills. "Sunset Inn has great senior shuttle service, and it's cheap." She emphasized cheap like it was the only perk of my upcoming life. Michael didn't look up from his phone. "I've reserved a room for you. Room 7. It has AC and cable." His voice was flat, like he was ordering something on Amazon. I looked at them, my son and the woman he called his wife, and no longer recognized who was family and who was a stranger. Tessa patted my shoulder lightly, then turned away. Michael said nothing more. Just got in the car, slammed the door, and drove off, leaving me standing frozen on the porch, holding a suitcase in one hand and $200 in the other. Sunset Inn sat off the highway between a deserted gas station and an auto shop closed since last winter. From the outside, it looked like a row of old warehouses hastily repainted. I stepped into room 7, the room reserved for me. Inside was a sagging double bed, a crumpled rug, an AC unit blowing warm air, and a musty, damp smell lingering in the walls. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress creaking like a complaint. In my hand was a framed photo, the only thing I'd managed to keep amid the rushed packing. It was me and Marilyn, our 40th anniversary, her in a sky blue dress, eyes bright, smile gentle. We thought we'd spend our final years in that house. Not one part of that future included me being kicked out with $200 in a cheap motel room. I set the frame on the nightstand, forcing myself to believe this was temporary. But then I looked at the paper Michael had given me before leaving. Full power of attorney. According to it, I had voluntarily signed over all ownership of the house, bank accounts, and medical decisions to Michael Brennan. The date was 4 days ago, 2 days after Marilyn's funeral. I vaguely remembered sitting in the living room, my mind reeling from grief and sleeping pills. Michael had brought some insurance papers to sign, saying they were to make sure you don't have to worry about funeral or hospital costs. I hadn't read closely. I trusted my son. Now here I was, in a strange room, no home, no accounts, no future. I pulled my wallet from my old coat pocket, counting the money. $200, the price of a father erased from his own life. My mind swirled with unanswered questions. When had Michael planned this? Since Marilyn got sick, were all those caring questions, those recent family dinners, just a facade? And Tessa, her empty eyes, her soulless smile. How much had she calculated in this? I had no answers, just one stark truth glaring from the peeling walls. I had lost everything. The house I built from the first brick, the wife I swore to hold until the end, the son I poured all my hopes into. All that remained were cold, empty voids, and I, Arthur Brennan, 71 years old, sat in a $49 a night motel room, wondering, how did it come to this? I looked at Marilyn's photo on the table. Her smile seemed to ask the same question. In that moment, a memory sparked. The last time Marilyn and I visited Wendell Stone's law office, our longtime friend and family lawyer for nearly 3 decades. We went to update our will. I remembered clearly. Marilyn insisted that if she went first, all assets, the house, accounts, retirement stocks, would go to me, and only after I passed would they be divided to Michael. We agreed. We signed the papers. So where did this full power of attorney Michael produced come from? I decided to find Wendell. It was the only way to restore some sanity amid this chaos. I checked my wallet. $147 left after 2 nights at Sunset Inn and a cold sandwich. A round-trip bus to downtown Springfield cost nearly $12. I sat on the hard plastic seat by the dusty window, watching the streets pass like a replay of old days, where I took Marilyn for anniversary dinners, where Michael first rode a bike, where our family once had a seemingly stable life. Now those memories were ruins, while the reality was a betrayed father on a bus, clutching a photo frame and a fragile hope. Wendell's office was on the 3rd floor of an old red brick building, a brass nameplate still hanging by the door. Wendell Stone, attorney at law. As I walked in, Ellen, the elderly secretary, looked up, eyes wide with shock. "Mr. Brennan, you're still in the country?" I froze. "Why wouldn't I be?" Ellen stammered. "Your son said you were traveling Europe, recovering after your wife's passing." My heart clenched. A calculated lie. "I need to see Wendell, urgently." Ellen stood, asking no more. A minute later, the office door opened, and Wendell stepped out, white hair and familiar gray-blue suit, but his eyes held a mix of surprise and concern. "Arthur? My God," I thought. "Michael said you were in Paris with old friends. I called your house at least 6 times. No answer. Emailed, and your son replied, 'Dad's resting, not available.'" I sank into the chair across his desk. "Wendell? I haven't gone anywhere. I'm at Sunset Inn. My son just threw me out of my own house." Wendell paused, then sat down slowly opposite me. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." I recounted it all. Marilyn's funeral. Michael and Tessa's sweet yet controlling words. The day they presented papers claiming I'd signed. And now I had nothing but $135 and a shabby motel room. Wendell sighed. "Arthur, I have your and Marilyn's will here. You updated it 3 years ago. You're the sole beneficiary of all assets. Michael only inherits after you pass." He pulled a thick file from a drawer, flipping quickly. "Here, signed March 12th, 3 years ago. Notarized, witnessed, fully valid. What about the full power of attorney?" Wendell's eyes turned grave. "There is one. Filed 10 days ago. But not through me, not my office." He stood, went to the records room, and returned with a copy. "This is the copy I got from the county office, filed by Michael Brennan." He handed me the paper silently. I took it, reading each line. My name, my signature, or someone's near-perfect imitation. "I never signed this." Wendell nodded. "Arthur, I believe you, and I suspect this is a forgery." He pointed to the witness section. "The witness is Laura Hennings. That name doesn't work for me, or any notary office I know." He looked me in the eye. "If this is a forgery, your son has committed a serious crime. Fraud, forging legal documents, elder abuse. And if there's a third party involved, possibly organized fraud." I sat motionless in the old leather chair in Wendell Stone's office, my eyes still fixed on the copy of the forged document my son used to throw me out of the house. I built brick by brick. Wendell slid a cup of coffee toward me, but I didn't touch it. Inside me was a deadly calm, the kind that comes after a blow too heavy to trust. Wendell was flipping through more files, his eyes pensive, then stopped at a thick document bound in dark brown leather. He placed it on the desk, turned it toward me, and said slowly, "Arthur, this is the final will you and Marilyn signed 2 years ago. I personally witnessed and notarized it. There have been no legal updates since." I carefully opened the file. The first page bore our names, Marilyn June Brennan and Arthur Allen Brennan. Date signed, June 22nd, 2 years ago. Wendell pointed to an underlined section. "According to this, all real estate, assets, financial accounts, and joint investments valued at $33 million USD are transferred to Arthur Brennan. Full ownership, management, and use." My heart pounded. Wendell continued, his voice slow but firm. "However, there's an additional clause, proposed by Marilyn herself. The next heir, Michael, will only receive his share upon your passing, on the condition, within 12 months of my wife's death, our son Michael Allen Brennan must care for his father with respect, not abuse power, and not engage in deceit or asset seizure while his father is alive. I read the passage over and over. Each word was like a blade slicing through the mask Michael and Tessa had worn for 6 weeks. Sweet, kind, concerned for my safety. Not because they cared, but because they thought I was a doddering old man, easy to manipulate, easy to discard like a broken watch. They didn't know the man they betrayed was once a lead engineer overseeing hundreds of millions in civic projects across Missouri. They didn't know my mind at 71 still worked as precisely as the force gauge I designed in 1983. I looked up, meeting Wendell's eyes. So if Michael just kicked me out, used fake papers, lied to a lawyer, and blocked my access to assets, then, Wendell nodded, coldly. Then he's forfeited his inheritance, and he could face criminal charges for elder abuse, document fraud, and asset theft. He paused, then added, Arthur, your son made a fatal mistake, thinking you weren't sharp anymore. I leaned back in the chair, a long sigh escaping from deep in my chest. All those sleepless nights, wondering if I was wrong to doubt my own son. All those times I berated myself, thinking, he just wants what's best for Dad. But no, it wasn't concern. He just wanted to shove me out fast enough before I could see his plan to seize the estate. And now Michael had lost everything. Not just $33 million, but his honor, his character, the image of the dutiful son he'd built his whole life. Wendell, what should I do first? I asked, my voice steadying. He looked at me for a long moment, then replied, First, we need to verify how that forged power of attorney was created, who notarized it, if any third parties were involved. I'll contact the notary office and check the original records. Second, we should report this to the police to start the process of charging fraud and elder abuse. If you want. I closed my eyes. There was no hatred in me, but a clarity that couldn't be shaken. Michael had to face consequences. Wendell stood, went to the photocopier, and brought back 2 certified copies of the original will. One for you, one I'll keep for filing with the authorities if needed. And do you want me to contact the city police? I paused, then nodded. Yes. Start here. As I left the office, I gripped the file like it was the only map back to my home. Outside, the cold autumn wind whipped through Springfield's alleys. I boarded the bus back to Sunset Inn, my mind empty but my heart, for the first time in weeks, beating calmly. When I opened the motel room door, the familiar musty smell hit me, but this time, I felt no shame. I placed the will on the table, poured a glass of water from a plastic bottle, and turned on the TV as if it were a normal day. But I knew, normal died with Marilyn. And now, I was no longer the old man bowing to suffering. I was the man who would reclaim justice for myself and my late wife, who believed her son would act honorably. She had foreseen this. She left a silent shield. And I, Arthur Brennan, would raise that shield to protect myself. I didn't sleep that night. In the shabby motel room, under the sickly yellow light and the hum of the rattling AC, I sat staring at the carefully laminated will, like a fragile talisman in the storm my son and his wife had unleashed. In my heart wasn't anger, but a chilling realization, the feeling of discovering that what I cherished my whole life was just a trap. But this time, I wasn't running. I was preparing to fight. The next morning, at 8 a.m., I returned to Wendell's office. He was waiting, eyes resolute, phone already set to record. I just called Lieutenant Rachel Weller, Fraud and Elder Abuse Unit, Springfield Police Department. She'll be here in 20 minutes. I nodded, no questions needed. The game had begun. At 8:23 a.m., the office door swung open. Rachel Weller stepped in. Her face showed little emotion, but her eyes were sharp as a scalpel. A woman in her mid-40s, hair tied high, posture neat, with the coldness of someone too familiar with betrayal from those closest. Mr. Brennan? She extended her hand. I'll handle your case. I need you to tell me everything from the start, as detailed as possible. I recounted it all. Marilyn's death, the days Michael and Tessa stayed to help, the power of attorney. I signed in grief-stricken haze, and the moment I was thrown out like discarded junk. I even mentioned the $200 Tessa pressed into my hand, as if I were a stranger needing bus fare. Rachel didn't interrupt. She took notes, occasionally clarifying. Do you remember what day you signed? Was anyone else present? Did anyone mention full power of attorney when you signed? I shook my head. I only remembered my hand trembling from tears, and them handing me the pen and paper. We'll verify the power of attorney's validity, but if, as you say, it was signed under mental distress without a lawyer present, and used improperly, that's prosecutable fraud. She closed her file. I'll start by freezing all related financial accounts. We'll also request a review of any unusual transactions in the last 60 days. Wendell nodded. I've sent a copy of the original will to the Department of Justice and requested a hold on all asset transfers. From now on, any moves on the house, savings, investments, will be blocked. A weight lifted from my chest. I hadn't won yet, but I'd pulled the emergency brake. At 11 a.m., my phone buzzed. Michael calling. I stared at the screen, his name a knife's edge. I didn't answer. Another call. Still didn't pick up. A text followed. Dad, there's a problem. The bank denied a transaction. Call me back ASAP. I powered off the phone. I wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. The strike had to be precise, at the right moment, when he had no escape. Those who think they're above everyone panic most when the ground beneath them crumbles. Rachel texted that afternoon. We've frozen 7 accounts under Michael and Tessa's names. Over $3 million locked. We'll keep digging deeper. I pictured Michael's face when his credit card was declined. He's probably cursing, while Tessa purses her lips, feigning calm but her eyes darting, trying to guess what's happening. That evening, I ate my first canned beef stew in nearly 40 years. It wasn't delicious, but it was warm. I savored it slowly, looking out at the trash-strewn parking lot of Sunset Inn. A strange calm enveloped me. They thought I was a senile old man, but those kids didn't know they were stepping on a landmine. I was sitting in Wendell's office with Rachel Weller when my phone rang. The screen showed a familiar name, Michael. I let it ring 4 times before picking up, raising it to my ear slowly, as if I had all day to wait for this call. Hello, Dad? Michael's voice was strained, panting like he'd just run a marathon. Where are you? The bank. They froze everything. They said the accounts are under investigation. The credit card got declined. Do you know what's going on? I looked at Rachel. She nodded slightly, signaling, say what you want to say. I turned back to the phone, keeping my voice so calm it was almost cold. I'm sitting in Wendell Stone's law office with investigator Rachel Weller. They'd love to hear you explain what's happening. The other end went silent for a few seconds. A heavy silence, like someone had just slapped Michael across the face. Then his voice softened, smaller. Dad, it's not what you think. I was just trying to help you. You know, after Mom's funeral, you were a wreck. I was worried about you, so I cut him off. So you forged my signature to transfer assets. Had your wife booked me a room at Sunset Inn and shoved $200 in my hand like I was a beggar, then told me to find somewhere to die in peace? Dad, you've got it wrong. Tessa, she just wanted what's best for you. We both care about your health, your safety. That house is too big for you to manage alone. I sighed, my voice steady. Michael, don't you get it? I've lived in that house for over 40 years. I built it with my own hands. Every brick, every door carries the marks of me and your mother. And you thought I couldn't handle staying there just 3 days after burying her? He went silent. I continued. Do you know how much your mother left? What are you talking about? The will. $33 million. The house, accounts, stocks, assets, everything left to me. With a condition, you had to care for me for 12 months after her death. And you'd only inherit if you treated me with respect, without abusing trust. A sharp intake of breath. I could almost hear his heart racing through the phone. Dad, I didn't know. You thought I wouldn't read the fine print, or that I was too senile to be manipulated, or too grief-stricken to fight back. Whatever you thought, you were wrong. Michael switched to pleading. His voice turned desperate. Dad, I know I messed up, but don't take this to court. Don't go to the police. You can't do this to me. I'm your son. It's all a misunderstanding, a misstep. I gave a soft laugh. No humor in it. Son, it's not that I can't. It's that I already have. And now I'm going to finish what I started. Can I come to you? I stared out the glass door, where Springfield's sky was heavy with gray clouds, not a ray of sun. You told me to find a place to die, I said, my voice still soft. But I found a place to start over. I hung up. Rachel handed me a hot coffee. I've handled over 200 elder fraud cases, but few people are as sharp and determined as you, Mr. Brennan. I took the coffee, my hand trembling slightly. But this time, it wasn't from age or illness. It was adrenaline, something I thought had long left my body, now coursing through my veins. I was no longer the man sitting numbly in a motel, clutching my wife's photo. I was the man about to take everything back with clarity, the law and a resolve that surprised even me. Outside, the wind picked up. I was sipping my third coffee in Wendell's office when Rachel Weller returned with a thick file. Her eyes were colder than before, no longer just professional, now tinged with anger. We've completed the initial review, she said, placing the file in front of me. Mr. Brennan, what your son and daughter-in-law did wasn't a slip-up or a reckless mistake. This was a detailed plan set in motion weeks, possibly months ago. I wasn't surprised. Nothing shocked me anymore. But I still asked, what exactly? Rachel flipped a few pages. The power of attorney you were asked to sign 3 days after the funeral. It's a forged copy, not in the state's official notary system. Your signature was copied from an older document. But what's more alarming is how they legitimized everything. I looked at her intently. They had someone on the inside, someone who knows the law, understands bank operations, asset transfer processes, and how to bypass automatic audits. And from our preliminary investigation, that person is likely your daughter-in-law. Tessa? I blurted. Rachel nodded. She worked in the legal department of a major investment bank in Denver for 3 years, handling asset transfer documents and legal powers of attorney. She quit right before she and Michael moved to Springfield. I leaned back in the chair. The pieces were falling into place. Tessa's saccharine smile, her vacant eyes, her discreet silence whenever I asked about finances. She always let Michael talk, always stood in the background, always smiled. Now I understood. She wasn't in the background to play a supporting role. She was pulling the strings. I thought Michael wasn't cruel enough to do this, I said softly. Now I'm sure. He wasn't smart enough to do it alone. Rachel nodded, not denying it. Tessa was the brains, I continued. Michael was just the spoiled son who never had to fight for anything in his life. When his mother was alive, Marilyn always indulged him. And I always thought he'd grow up to know right from wrong. I was wrong. Rachel opened the next page. It gets worse, Mr. Brennan. Within 10 days of the power of attorney being activated, Tessa directed the transfer of $2.4 million from joint accounts to an investment fund in the Cayman Islands, under a shell company where she and Michael are nominal directors. I stiffened. They laundered money? Legalized profit transfer is more accurate. But essentially, yes. Signs of international money laundering. And it's all my money. Rachel looked me in the eye. And Marilyn's. And the 43 years you worked tirelessly. I gripped the chair's armrests. I'd seen people lose homes, assets, even their dignity for trusting the wrong family. But I never thought I'd be one of them, especially not with Michael, the son I held when he was feverish at 3, taught to change a tire at 16, helped get a loan for his first house. And now, he kicked me out of the home I built, shoved $200 in my hand like charity, and told me to find a place to die. Rachel closed the file. I'll contact the feds. If there's evidence of international money laundering, we'll work with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Office of International Financial Fraud. But rest assured, all asset movements were frozen this morning. I nodded, my voice almost breaking. Do you think they know yet? They're definitely sensing something's wrong, but not the specifics. They'll find out within 24 hours, and then, I finished for her, their nightmare begins. They exploited my trust, used my pain, and bet on my resignation. But they didn't know if they saw trust as a gamble. I was the player still holding the ace. I was drinking coffee in Wendell's kitchen when Rachel called. Mr. Brennan, her voice was even, but I could hear a hint of satisfaction beneath the professionalism. We just got them. I stayed silent, gripping the coffee mug. Tonight, at Lamar Restaurant, 8:47 p.m. They booked a table for 2, ordered a 2009 French red wine, and a premium Argentine steak. Looked like they were celebrating. I'm guessing they didn't know the accounts were frozen. No, Rachel said. The credit card was declined. They called the waiter over 3 times, started arguing, and that's when we stepped in. I could picture it clearly. Michael in a crisp white shirt, Tessa with her classic pearl necklace, both basking in false confidence, thinking the world was still in their hands, until 3 police officers approached their table, told them to stand, handcuffed them, and read their rights. Rachel called it the most blatant family asset fraud she'd ever handled. You're right, I replied, eyes still on the window. They didn't just take money, they stole trust. The FBI has been notified, Rachel continued. When we sent the report about the overseas transfers involving at least 3 shell companies and 2 Cayman banks, they jumped in. This isn't just a civil or state criminal case anymore. It's a federal investigation. I nodded, pensive. And they'll be prosecuted? Absolutely. Charges include elder abuse, financial fraud, document forgery, and possibly international money laundering. I set the mug down, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't want to see them. I understand. I don't want apologies. I don't want to see tearful regret. They had their chance to stop, to talk, but they chose to kick me out of their lives like old junk. Rachel was silent for a few seconds. Then she said softly, and now you're the one with the power to decide. I remembered Michael's words just days ago. Dad, you should find somewhere else to die. And now, they were locked up in Greene County detention. Michael, who called me a stubborn old man when I refused his suggested new investment scheme. Tessa, who reminded me of age-related memory decline just because I couldn't recall a bank account password. I wasn't declining. I just trusted the wrong people. I didn't say more to Rachel. We ended the call. That evening, I watched the local news. The anchor spoke urgently. The arrest of Michael and Tessa Campbell, linked to suspected fraud against the father, has shocked the Springfield community. The couple was apprehended at Lamar, one of the city's finest dining spots, during dinner. The screen showed blurry surveillance footage. Tessa turned to Michael as 3 officers approached. Her face was pale. And Michael? He was trying to smile at the waiter like it was a misunderstanding. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was consequences. And I was ready to face those consequences, even if they brought scandal, investigations, or neighborhood gossip. Then I thought of Marilyn. She once said, One day if our son veers off course, I hope you have the courage not to cover for him. I looked at our wedding photo, now hanging in the living room of the temporary apartment Wendell lent me. Rest easy, Marilyn, I whispered. I didn't cover for him. 3 days after the arrests, as I was brewing morning coffee in Wendell's kitchen, the doorbell rang. Wendell glanced at his watch, then at me. Expecting anyone? I shook my head, walked to the door. Through the frosted glass, I saw a sleek black SUV parked out front. The woman who stepped out needed no introduction. Her demeanor said it all. Camel hair coat, her mess bag, oversized sunglasses hiding half her face, but they couldn't conceal the arrogance and calculation etched into her features. I'm Charlene Rutherford, she said, her voice sharp as a razor without needing to be loud. Tessa's mother, we need to talk. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. If you're here about your daughter, I'm afraid there's nothing to say. Charlene tilted her chin, not stepping inside but not leaving either. I think you'll want to hear my offer before continuing this war. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. War is when both sides have something to lose, ma'am. I've got nothing left. They took it all. Not everything, Charlene replied. She pulled a thick, wax-sealed envelope from her bag like a challenge. This contains a check for $5 million. I didn't hide my surprise, but kept my voice even. And what do I have to do to earn such generosity? Drop the lawsuit, stop all proceedings, let it go. That girl's family, Michael and Tessa, will go abroad for a while. When things settle, they'll rebuild their lives. And you'll have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of yours. In exchange for my silence. Charlene nodded. Exactly. And an end to a mess I'm sure you don't want dragging on. The media will dig into your past. The press won't stop at Michael and Tessa. They'll look at you, at Marilyn, at years you thought were forgotten. I laughed. That's an odd way to threaten me. You think I've got something in my past worth hiding? Charlene smiled faintly. I don't need to know. The press doesn't need truth. Just a headline. I stared at the woman before me, a seasoned fox cloaked in Chanel perfume and luxury goods. I knew her type, used to throwing money at scandals, manipulating from the shadows without showing her claws. But this time she picked the wrong man. I pushed the door open a bit wider. Do you know what I did before I retired? Charlene blinked. What? I was a civil engineer. 43 years working on structural systems. I built bridges strong enough to withstand storms. I calculated every angle, every force, and I know exactly when a breaking point is reached. I tilted my head. You're standing on that breaking point, Charlene, and you think you can scare me with a check and vague threats. Her face tightened, just for a moment, before she regained her composure. You'll regret this. I've already regretted trusting my son, not seeing my daughter-in-law for the hypocrite she is. Now I've got nothing left to regret, just justice to reclaim. I stepped back. Go ahead, Charlene. Let the media dig into my life. If there's anything shameful, at least it's not helping my daughter steal $33 million and kicking my father-in-law out of his home. The door closed with a soft click, light but heavy as a declaration of war. I didn't need to open the envelope to know what was inside. Numbers can't buy back honor or truth. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. A firm female voice spoke. Mr. Arthur Brennan? This is Special Agent Dana Brooks, FBI. We need to meet tomorrow morning. Nothing to worry about. On the contrary, you'll want to hear this. I agreed without asking more. In my life, the words FBI never knocked as good news, but this time, my gut told me otherwise. The next morning, I arrived at the federal office on Jefferson Avenue. Special Agent Brooks, a black woman in her 40s with a crisp suit and eyes that missed nothing, greeted me with a firm handshake. She led me to a small, soundproofed meeting room, quiet as if cut off from the world. Mr. Brennan, she began, placing a file on the table. I know you've been through a lot, but there's a part of this story you don't know, a very important part. I sat still, waiting for her to continue. Do you remember working at Lockwood Defense Technologies? The 80s to late 90s? Of course, I nodded. I handled tactical data bridge engineering, the Navy's first jam-resistant communication systems. And do you remember some internal issues at the company? The reports you filed? The closed-door meetings with investigators? I fell silent. Those matters, I thought they were buried. Over 25 years ago, I had reported internally about Lockwood cooking the costs of a series of defense contracts, inflating them by tens of millions. I didn't know who ultimately received the information, only that an agent named Whitaker handled the case. Then it all went quiet. I wasn't fired, wasn't called back. No one ever mentioned it again. I assumed it was buried in the layers of the system. Brooks looked at me intently. You signed a confidentiality agreement in 1998, didn't you? Regarding cooperation with the investigation? I nodded. But they told me I wouldn't be called again. I didn't think. And they kept that promise. The FBI honored it. You were a key witness in a major defense corruption case. But for various reasons, including political ones, the case was never made public. However, Under a low-level whistleblower protection clause, you and your wife were allowed to retain a portion of the legitimate assets from a confidential settlement Lockwood paid to the government. I was stunned. A settlement? Brooks nodded. About $18 million was quietly transferred to a special fund. Most of it was later used to compensate you and Marilyn through legal channels. Stocks, private investments, high-yield retirement funds. I whispered. So, most of the assets Marilyn left behind are entirely legitimate, she confirmed. And you have full legal claim to them, uncontestable. I exhaled, feeling like someone had just pulled me out of a months-long haze. I looked at Brooks, Michael, and Tessa. They had no idea about this. No one outside us and a small group in the Defense Investigation Unit knew. They thought they were just seizing a standard inheritance, but in reality they stumbled into a block of assets under special government oversight. I sat still, then let out a soft laugh. So, I helped the FBI without even knowing I was playing the hero. Brooks smiled. We call them silent whistleblowers. No medals, no recognition, but you helped us expose millions in misappropriated tax dollars. I looked at the file before me. It detailed assets, investments, apartments in other states I'd never set foot in but had been in my name for 15 years. And now? I asked. Now, the FBI will officially recognize you as the legal owner of the entire asset block. And simultaneously, we're considering additional charges against Michael and Tessa for interfering with assets under national security protection. They thought they were just stealing an inheritance, but they crossed into a red zone. I nodded, a mix of bitterness and peace rising within me. Maybe my whole life I'd always been that engineer designing things to never collapse, even my own life. I looked straight into Special Agent Dana Brooks's eyes. She didn't need to say much, just placed a device the size of half a matchbox on the table. You know this could completely change the case's trajectory? I nodded. No hesitation. I'll wear it. If they think they can bend the truth with papers and pleas, it's time they learned I'm no longer the patient father I once was. The FBI arranged a meeting that evening at my house. More precisely, my house. Legally reaffirmed less than 48 hours prior. They suggested I play the role of a frail, wavering old man open to negotiation, and I played it perfectly. 7:58 p.m. I was seated in the living room, the recording device pinned close to my chest under my shirt. Agent Brooks and another agent waited in a car outside, monitoring everything via live feed. The lights were dimmed. A steaming teacup sat neatly in front of me, like a scene from a carefully staged film. The doorbell rang at 8 sharp. I opened the door. Michael stepped in first, clutching a file. Tessa followed, dressed neatly, makeup subtle, her face a mix of calm and scrutiny. I recognized that look, not the look of a daughter-in-law, but of a lawyer gambling on her final play. Dad, Michael began, his voice softer than ever before. We're here to resolve this peacefully. We know you're angry, but this doesn't need to go to court. Tessa sat beside him, opening a briefcase. We have an agreement. You keep this house and $5 million from the old assets. In exchange, you drop the complaint and agree to end all legal proceedings. No media, no court. I stared at the papers they placed on the table. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part felt pity. They still thought this was a game, that I'd trade justice for a few papers. That $5 million could replace fairness. I sipped my tea, then set the cup down. I have one condition, I said slowly. Tessa tilted her head. Go ahead, Dad. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone, already set to play audio. One press. A voice filled the room. Michael's from 3 days ago, in a call I'd quietly recorded with another device. Dad's too old to understand these investments. We have the power of attorney, just transfer all the assets to my name. He doesn't need the details. I watched them, their faces began to drain of color. I pressed for the second clip. Tessa's voice from a conversation with her mother-in-law recorded by the FBI during their bank account investigation. Just get him to sign those papers, and it's done. A grieving, confused old widower who'd believe him if something goes wrong? I didn't need to say more. The room grew heavy as stone. Michael stammered, standing. Dad, what are you doing? I'm giving you one last chance to hear the truth, and the truth doesn't come with negotiation clauses. I stood. I think you should meet someone better at negotiating than me. Right then, the front door swung open. Agent Brooks stepped in, followed by 2 more federal agents. Michael Brennan, Tessa Rutherford, you're under arrest for fraud, document forgery, conspiracy to misappropriate assets, and elder abuse. Michael spun toward me. Dad, how could you? I'm your son. I looked at my son, his face frantic, eyes starting to glisten. This wasn't the child I held during a fever at 3 years old. This was an adult who chose the wrong path and didn't regret it until caught red-handed. You knelt to beg me to sign a fake power of attorney, I said. Now kneel to beg the government for mercy. And he did kneel. Tessa said nothing. As the agent cuffed her, her eyes met mine, empty just like the look she gave me when she sent me off with, "They have great senior shuttle service there." I stood there, silent, watching the door close behind them. Not to gloat, but to be certain I'd never be kicked out of my own life again. The next morning, I sat alone in the living room, sunlight streaming through the curtains onto the interior renovation contract I'd signed the day before. Sitting in my house, no longer Marilyn and Arthur's house, nor the house Michael planned to turn into a family office, but the house of Arthur Brennan, 71, retired engineer, who had just turned the tables. Michael and Tessa had been federally indicted on charges including conspiracy to defraud, document forgery, elder asset misappropriation, and intentional overseas money transfers to evade tracing. The $33 million in assets illegally transferred, now fully restored, thanks to the legal will and the FBI's coordination with Wendell. Since Marilyn's passing, I hadn't slept through a single night until morning. But last night, I didn't dream of her. I dreamed of the kitchen repainted, the curtains she hated replaced. I dreamed of the wooden table I built, now in the living room, not hidden in the garage. For the first time in 43 years, I could shape my living space as my own. I called contractors to install bookshelves, tore down the wine room Michael planned, and turned the basement into a painting studio, something Marilyn always supported but never had space for. A month after Michael's arrest, I appeared on Good Morning Springfield. The reporter asked, "Do you think your son and daughter-in-law truly understand the consequences of their actions?" I replied, "I think they do, but it's too late." That response went viral on social media. I don't know when people started calling me the Springfield dad who wouldn't bow. Newspapers published photos of me in front of my house with a sign, "This is my home, and I'm still alive." I didn't set out to be famous. I just wanted to protect myself. But when an article in the Missouri Times about my case got over 200,000 shares, a 74-year-old man from Tulsa called and said, "You're why I dared to sue my son for mortgaging my house in my name." And that changed everything. I founded the Brennan Foundation for Elder Protection. Wendell helped me formalize it, and Agent Dana Brooks, the one who assisted with the recording, connected me to a lobbyist lawyer who'd worked with Congress. In the first 4 months, we received 6,000 letters from elderly people across the U.S. Stories of abuse by their children, forced asset transfers, or being placed in nursing homes against their will. My story wasn't an exception. It was the tip of an iceberg. I used $12 million of the restored assets to fund free legal aid for seniors. The rest was split 3 ways: home renovations, a Marilyn Brennan engineering scholarship at the University of Missouri, and a reserve fund for long-term operations. What I once thought was dead wealth became a tool to protect those like me, betrayed by the ones they raised. I was invited to speak at a national elder abuse conference in Washington, D.C. I opened with, "When my only son kicked me out of the home I built with my sweat and blood, I didn't think I'd stand again, but I did, because no one has the right to take a father's dignity just because they think he has no one backing him." Local TV replayed that speech 3 times in a week. A friend of Marilyn's, Ruth from San Diego, sent a handwritten letter. If Marilyn were here, she'd have stood and clapped in the middle of the room. I won't deny it. Sometimes I miss Michael. I'm not foolish. I know there's still a part of him that's the kid who slipped a hand-drawn card into my shirt pocket on Father's Day when he was 6. But adults are accountable for their actions. Michael chose betrayal, chose lies, chose money over the father trying to live on after his wife's death. Once Michael's lawyer sent a letter, "My client wishes to apologize. He's changed." I didn't respond. In a brief interview with a reporter while awaiting her preliminary hearing, Tessa said only, "We thought we were managing things for Dad. He doesn't understand the financial market, and that's something I'll never forget. The way they justified throwing a father out of his home as financially rational." I still remember the first night sleeping in the master bedroom, where Marilyn passed in my arms. The bedside lamp she chose was still there, her hand-knit blanket neatly folded. But this time I lay in that bed as a living man, no longer a wandering shadow of a widower. I am Arthur Brennan, who was betrayed but didn't fall. And that's what Michael never expected. He thought I'd give in, as I had for years when he argued with his mother, defied me, and still thought he was right. But every father has a limit. And when that limit is crossed, when the hand that raised him for 30 years is stripped of its humanity, everything changes. I became the father he never knew, the one ready to stand, not out of anger, but for survival. And what Michael didn't understand is this: when a father must choose between losing his son or losing himself, he'll choose to live. One June morning, while checking the mailbox by the gate, I found a thick envelope with handwriting I recognized instantly. Michael's. Not the first time. In the past 3 months, he'd sent 9 letters, 6 from him, 3 from Tessa, all from the federal detention center where they're serving 18 months. A facility for financial criminals, not the grim prison of movies, but still a place where freedom is confined. and that's what they deserve. I brought the envelope inside, placed it on the wooden table by the window, the table I built by hand, once called too rustic by Michael for the living room. I brewed a pot of coffee, opened the window to let light flood in, and sat with the unopened letter. Every move deliberate, enough to confirm my heart held no trace of pity. I opened the letter. Pale yellow paper, blue ink. Michael's handwriting still neat as in grade school, but no longer the strokes of a child writing, "I love you, Dad." Now it was rambling, belated remorse. "I know I hurt you. Things got out of control. Please give us a chance to make it right." I folded the letter, not out of anger, but because it was irrelevant. Apologies after betrayal aren't redemption, they're survival instinct. Michael and Tessa didn't write out of regret. They wrote because they had nothing left to grasp but pity, and I stopped giving pity the day they kicked me out with $200 in my hand. I took the letter to the backyard, placed it in Marilyn's old ceramic bowl, and lit a match. The paper burned to ash in silence. Just a thin layer of gray dust I scattered on the ground. The wind carried it away, and I let it go, like I let go of the notion they were still family. Because family doesn't steal each other's homes, doesn't trick a father into signing a power of attorney after losing his wife, doesn't say, "Dad, find somewhere else to die." No, they're not family anymore. They're DNA. I live alone but not lonely. My painting studio, once a garage for Michael's junk, now glows with sunlight. I reinstalled a glass door from a flea market, planted shrubs by the windowsill, and set up an easel from Marilyn's old blanket drying frame. I paint every day, not to paint well, just to paint true. I paint Marilyn in the floral dress she wore when I proposed, the old porch where we drank tea for our first 3 summers of marriage, the dog Rocco, who Michael pushed out for smelling bad, and then I paint myself. The last painting I'm finishing, a canvas over 5 feet tall, ash gray background like the coat I wore when kicked out. In the center, a man stands in a dark hallway. Light from ahead shines on his face. Gray hair, gaunt cheeks, eyes no longer teary, only calm. He holds an old suitcase, and he steps forward, one step, out of the dark, out of shame, out of endurance, out of the false belief his child would never harm him, and into the only thing left, himself. I paint the final stroke. A glint of light reflects on his face. Chin high, shoulders straight, no resentment, no chasing the past, just a man who stood up, survived, and chose to live for himself. Outside, the wind gently stirs the tree I planted last year. Sunlight spills through the window, and in that moment, I feel something I hadn't in 43 years. Freedom. Not freedom from debt, illness, or loneliness. Freedom from others' expectations. Freedom from the role of the kind, enduring father. Freedom from the endless duty to forgive just because someone shares my blood. I didn't choose my son, I only chose to love him. And when he chose to betray me, I chose myself again. Below the painting, I'll write a line, the one I want etched into my new life. The best revenge is becoming everything they thought you never could be. In America today, where individual independence and property rights are deeply valued, Arthur Brennan's story is not just a family tragedy, but a haunting wake-up call about a growing issue, financial abuse of the elderly, especially by their own kin. Arthur, a retired defense engineer, a devoted husband, a father who trusted his son enough to sign a power of attorney without reading it, paid the price, losing his home, money, and dignity, until he stood up to reclaim it all with intellect, composure, and justice. From Tessa, the daughter-in-law with a banking legal background orchestrating the fraud, to Michael's feigned concern about fall risks and high maintenance costs, this story exposes the familiar tactics used to manipulate and seize assets from seniors in America. Arthur's pain represents thousands of parents who sacrifice their lives for their children, only to be pushed aside as a burden. The deepest lesson: family doesn't guarantee safety, and love shouldn't be blind. Know your legal rights. Keep copies of wills and don't hesitate to seek lawyers, police, or elder protection organizations when needed. Arthur's story isn't just a sweet revenge tale, it's a reminder: a father is never weak if he holds justice in his hands. If you find this story worth sharing, hit subscribe to join me in protecting the parents being unfairly treated. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video with another journey where justice speaks again.